Heavenly Father, a new week begins this morning, and with it comes something I need more than almost anything else right now. Courage. Not the dramatic kind that faces down obvious danger, but the quieter kind that gets me out of bed and into a week I'm not entirely sure I feel ready for. I come to you this morning asking for exactly that, honestly, before I pretend to feel braver than I actually do. Thank you for this fresh start. Thank you that this Monday isn't simply a continuation of whatever last week left unfinished, but a genuine new beginning, carrying its own fresh mercy, regardless of how the previous week actually ended. Your compassions are new every morning, and I need that truth to be real for me today, not as a nice idea, but as something I actually lean my whole week on. I praise you, because you are the God who makes all things new, not just eventually, in some distant spiritual sense, but practically, in the actual rhythm of my life, week after week. Whatever failures or disappointments marked last week, they do not define this one. You are doing something new, even in an ordinary Monday morning, even in a week that might look, on paper, just like every other one before it. I think about how much courage it actually takes just to begin again, to step into a new week without knowing exactly how it will unfold, trusting that I can handle whatever comes, even though I can't yet see the shape of it. That's not a small thing to ask of myself, and I don't want to minimize how much genuine courage ordinary Mondays actually require, even when nothing about them looks particularly dramatic from the outside. You have carried me into every new week I've ever faced, and I have no real reason to believe this one will be the exception. That track record matters to me this morning, even though today's uncertainty still feels genuinely uncertain, regardless of how many times you've proven faithful before. I think about all the Mondays behind me, some that started with dread that turned out unfounded, some that started with confidence that turned out to be tested harder than I expected. In every case, without exception, you were present, carrying me through, regardless of how the week actually unfolded compared to how I anticipated it. That pattern doesn't erase this morning's uncertainty, but it does give me something solid to stand on while I face it. I'm grateful, too, for the simple fact of being here to begin again at all. Not everyone gets another Monday. Not every version of this week was guaranteed to me. I don't want to take that for granted, treating this fresh start as though it were owed to me rather than genuinely given. Another undeserved mercy stacked on top of all the ones that came before it. Before I move further into this new week, Lord, I want to be honest about the fear that sometimes accompanies fresh starts. I confess that new beginnings, even good ones, carry their own kind of anxiety. The fear of repeating old mistakes, the fear of not living up to whatever hope this fresh start represents, the fear that I'll simply fall back into the same patterns that made last week difficult in the first place. I confess the specific ways I doubt my own capacity to actually begin again well. I confess the voice that tells me I've tried this before and failed, that a new week doesn't actually change anything fundamental about my ability to handle it. I don't want to walk into today already defeated by a fear that hasn't even had the chance to prove itself true yet. I confess, too, the weight I sometimes still carry from last week, even into a morning meant for genuine release. Unresolved conversations, unfinished tasks, disappointments I haven't fully processed. I don't want to pretend that weight has disappeared simply because the calendar changed. I bring it honestly to you now, asking for the actual release that a fresh start is supposed to represent, not just the label of one. Forgive me, Lord, for the times I've let fear masquerade as caution, using anxiety as an excuse to avoid genuinely beginning again. Courage was never the absence of fear. It has always been moving forward despite it, trust in you rather than trusting my own confidence, which has never been fully reliable anyway. I surrender this new week to you now, completely, including whatever fear I'm still carrying into it. Not my will, but yours be done over every fresh start this Monday represents, and over every fear that's trying to convince me a fresh start isn't actually possible for me. I confess, too, that I sometimes sabotage fresh starts before they've even had a chance to prove themselves, approaching a new week already expecting it to disappoint me the way previous weeks sometimes have. That expectation has never once protected me from disappointment. It has only guaranteed that I entered the week already defeated, unable to notice the genuine good that might have been available to me if I'd approached it with more openness. I confess the specific comparisons I sometimes make between this fresh start and other people's apparently easier beginnings, wondering why courage seems to come more naturally to them, why their fresh starts seem to stick while mine sometimes unravel by Wednesday. I don't actually know the private struggles behind anyone else's apparent confidence, and comparing my beginning to their outward appearance has never once made my own courage easier to access. Help me release, too, the perfectionism that sometimes attaches itself to fresh starts. The belief that if I don't get this week exactly right, the fresh start itself was somehow wasted. That belief has never been true. A fresh start doesn't require flawless execution to be genuinely valuable. It simply requires honest engagement. However imperfectly, that engagement actually unfolds across the days ahead. Now, Father, I ask you directly for courage, real, practical courage for the specific challenges this week actually holds. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified, because the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I hold on to that promise this morning, not as a vague encouragement, but as an actual assurance I need to be true in the concrete hours ahead of me. Give me courage for the conversations I've been avoiding, the decisions I've been putting off, the tasks that feel too large to face without some measure of dread. I don't need to feel completely fearless to move forward today. I simply need enough courage to take the next actual step, trusting that you will provide what I need for the step after that when I actually reach it. I ask for courage to try again in the specific areas where I failed last week, without letting last week's failure convince me that trying again is pointless. Every new week is genuinely new, not because my circumstances have necessarily changed, but because your mercy toward me has been renewed, and that renewal changes what's actually possible, even when the external situation looks the same. Give me courage, too, to be honest this week. With myself, with the people around me, with you, rather than retreating into the comfortable half-truths that sometimes feel safer than genuine vulnerability. Real courage often looks less like grand gestures and more like small, honest moments, repeated consistently, choosing truth over easier avoidance again and again throughout an ordinary week. I ask for courage to rest when rest is what I actually need, resisting the pressure to prove myself through relentless busyness. Sometimes the most courageous thing I can do is admit my own limits and honor them, rather than pushing through exhaustion as though limitation were a weakness rather than simply the truth of being human. I think about how counterintuitive it feels to call rest an act of courage, when so much of what I've absorbed about strength suggests the opposite, that pushing through regardless of cost is what genuine courage actually looks like. But I don't think that's fully true. It often takes more courage to admit I've reached a limit than to simply keep pretending I haven't, especially in a culture that quietly rewards exhaustion as though it were proof of dedication. Help me practice that different kind of courage this week. The kind that says no when no is genuinely necessary, rather than the kind that simply endures indefinitely out of fear of looking weak. I also ask for courage in the small, unglamorous moments this week, not just the obviously significant ones. Courage to get out of bed on a morning that feels heavier than usual. Courage to show up fully present even when I'd rather withdraw. Courage to keep trying at something that hasn't yet produced the results I was hoping for. Most of the courage a week actually requires isn't dramatic. It's quiet, repeated, and easy to overlook. And I want to notice and value it as genuine courage rather than dismissing it as simply getting through the day. Give me courage, too, to celebrate genuine progress this week, however small, rather than only noticing what's still lacking. I sometimes withhold encouragement from myself until I've achieved some larger, more impressive milestone, missing the real courage it took to get even this far. Help me practice genuine self-compassion alongside genuine ambition, rather than treating them as though they were opposites. Lord, I think about what it actually means that your mercies are new every morning, not just poetically true, but practically real. In the specific reset this Monday represents. Whatever pattern I fell into last week, whatever version of myself showed up more than I wanted it to, this morning offers something genuinely different. A chance to begin again, not from nothing, but from renewed mercy, specifically designed to make fresh starts actually possible. I don't want to waste that mercy by walking into this week already convinced it will look exactly like the last one. Help me hold today with genuine hope rather than resigned repetition, trusting that you are capable of doing something different in me this week, even if the external circumstances remain largely the same. I think too, about how fresh starts require me to actually let go of what came before, not just intellectually acknowledge that a new week has begun, but genuinely release my grip on last week's failures and frustrations. Help me do that this morning, specifically naming what I'm releasing rather than simply hoping it fades on its own through sheer passage of time. Teach me what it looks like to walk into new beginnings with expectant faith rather than anxious hope, trusting not that everything will necessarily go smoothly, but that you will be genuinely present and faithful, regardless of how smoothly or roughly this week actually unfolds. That distinction matters to me this morning. I'm not asking for an easy week. I'm asking for the courage to face whatever kind of week this turns out to be. Father, I bring before you the specific fears I'm carrying into this Monday. Whatever meeting, conversation, decision, or task feels most daunting right now, I name it honestly before you, trusting that naming it is itself an act of courage rather than weakness. I don't have to pretend I'm not afraid in order to move forward faithfully. I simply have to move forward despite the fear, trusting you more than I trust the fear itself. Give me wisdom to distinguish between fears worth taking seriously, ones that point toward genuine caution I should heed, and fears that are simply noise, anxiety dressed up as wisdom, but actually just holding me back from something you're genuinely calling me toward. Help me tell the difference this week, rather than treat in every fear as equally authoritative simply because it's loud. I think about how often fear disguises itself as prudence, convincing me that hesitation is wisdom when it's actually just avoidance wearing a more respectable costume. I don't want to keep confusing the two. Give me discernment to recognize when caution genuinely serves me, and when it's simply protecting me from growth I actually need, uncomfortable as that growth might be to step into. I ask for strength to actually begin the things I've been putting off, trusting that momentum often only comes after the first difficult step, not before it. I don't need to feel fully ready before I start. Readiness, so often, is something that develops through beginning, not something I have to fully possess before beginning becomes possible. I think too about how much clarity tends to come only after action, not before it, and how much of my hesitation is actually rooted in wanting certainty I'm never going to get simply by continuing to wait. Help me move forward this week despite incomplete information, trusting that you will provide the clarity I need exactly when I need it, rather than requiring me to have it all figured out before I'm willing to take the first genuine step. And I ask for grace toward myself this week, for the moment's courage doesn't come as easily as I'd like, for the times fear wins around, despite my best intentions. I don't want this week's fresh start to become another occasion for self-judgment when it doesn't unfold perfectly. Renewed mercy means I get to begin again, not just once this Monday, but as many times throughout this week as I actually need to. Lord, I think about the specific areas of my life where I most need courage right now. Not in general terms, but concretely. A relationship that needs honest attention, a habit I've been avoiding changing, a dream I've been too afraid to actually pursue. I bring these specifically before you this morning, asking for the particular courage each one actually requires, rather than a generic bravery that doesn't quite fit any of them. I think too about how courage in one area of life often creates momentum for courage in others, the way a single honest conversation can somehow make the next difficult decision feel slightly more possible than it did before. Help me notice that momentum this week, rather than treating each act of courage as an isolated, unrelated event. I suspect they're more connected than I usually give them credit for. Give me courage to pursue what you're actually calling me toward, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires more vulnerability than I'm naturally inclined to offer. I don't want fear to be the reason I miss out on what you have for me this week, this month, this season of my life. Help me also recognize the courage I've already shown, even in small, unnoticed ways, rather than only measuring myself against the courage I still lack. Every difficult conversation I've had, every hard morning I've gotten through, every time I chose to keep going despite genuine fear, all of that counts as real courage, even when it didn't feel dramatic or heroic in the moment, even when no one else was there to witness or acknowledge it. Before I move into today, Father, I bring before you everyone else beginning this week with their own version of the fear and courage I'm carrying. I think of those facing genuinely difficult, fresh starts. A new job after a hard loss, a new diagnosis to navigate, a relationship beginning again after real brokenness. Give them courage that exceeds anything I could offer through this prayer. I lift up those who feel like they've failed too many times to believe a fresh start is genuinely possible for them anymore, who approach new beginnings with resignation rather than hope. Meet them exactly there, Lord. Remind them that your mercy doesn't run out simply because they've needed it many times before. I pray for those whose courage feels particularly thin this morning, worn down by an especially hard season that doesn't seem to lift regardless of how many fresh starts they attempt. Renew their strength specifically and give them just enough courage for today without requiring them to somehow find courage for every difficult day still ahead of them. And I pray for anyone beginning this week in genuine crisis, for whom fresh start feels like an impossible phrase given what they're actually facing. Be their strength in a way that goes far beyond what ordinary courage could accomplish, meeting them with power sufficient for circumstances that exceed ordinary human capacity to face alone. I think of those beginning this week after a genuine loss, a job, a relationship, a person they loved deeply, for whom Monday's fresh start feels less like hope and more like another reminder of what's now missing from their life. Be gentle with them today. Don't ask them to perform optimism they don't actually feel, and meet them instead in the honest grief that a fresh start doesn't automatically resolve. I pray for those starting new treatment, new therapy, new recovery this week, for whom courage looks like showing up to something genuinely difficult and uncertain, without any guarantee of the outcome they're hoping for. Give them strength for each individual step, without requiring them to feel confident about the entire journey all at once. I pray for those returning to work, to school, to responsibility after a difficult break, whose fresh start carries the added weight of re-entry after time away. Give them patience with themselves as they readjust, and courage to ask for help if the transition proves harder than they expected. And I pray for those who simply feel tired of needing to begin again so often, worn down by how many fresh starts life has already required of them. Renew their hope tonight, Lord, that this fresh start, like everyone before it, is still genuinely worth attempting, still held by the same faithful hands that have carried them through every previous beginning. As I move into this new week, Father, I want to carry this morning's courage with me, rather than leaving it behind the moment the first real challenge appears. Whatever this week actually holds, I trust that you are already present in it, already aware of every difficulty before I encounter it myself, already providing exactly the courage each specific moment will actually require. Thank you for this fresh start. Thank you for mercy that is genuinely new this morning, not because I've earned a clean beginning through my own effort, but because that has always simply been who you are toward me. Thank you for going before me into a week I haven't lived yet, and for promising to remain present through every single day of it. I commit this entire week to you now, my fears and my courage both, trusting that you can use even my most anxious Monday mornings for genuine growth. Let this be a week I meet with expectant faith rather than resigned dread, courage rather than avoidance, and let me end it able to look back and see clearly where you actually showed up. I don't know exactly how this week will test the courage I'm asking for this morning, which specific moment will require it most, which fear will prove loudest by Wednesday or Thursday. But I trust that whatever it is, you will already be there, providing exactly what that specific moment requires, the same way you have every other time I've faced something I wasn't sure I had the courage for. Let this fresh start actually take root, Lord, not just as a pleasant Monday morning feeling that fades by lunchtime, but as something that genuinely shapes how I move through the days ahead. I want this courage to outlast the prayer itself, carrying into ordinary moments throughout the week that don't feel particularly spiritual, but still require the same fundamental trust I'm practicing right now. Thank you for your courage that becomes mine when I need it. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for walking into this new week with me, before I have even taken the first uncertain step into it myself. Whatever this Monday actually holds beyond what I can currently imagine, I trust that your mercy will still be here tomorrow morning too, and the morning after that, and every morning this week requires, fresh each time, sufficient for whatever that specific day demands of me. I don't have to carry the whole week's courage in this single moment. I simply need enough for today, and I trust you to provide exactly that, the same way you always have. In Jesus' name, amen.